Hello, I'm Avery Kaplan. I'm the comm officer at Prism Comics.
And I'm AC Esguerra. I am a comics artist and illustrator based in LA. I'm the author of 80 Days.
Which we are here to speak about today.
Yay.
How are you today?
Good. How are you, Avery?
Good. So our first question is, 80 Days is a story that balances many different elements, including war and complicated class systems. Why was it important for you to tell a queer love story set in this type of world?
Well, so the romance is, the queer romance is central to the plot of 80 Days, but it's not necessarily the sole focus. And that was important to me because I also wanted to talk about, queer people are other things besides queer, right? And we're vulnerable in those ways too. We face racism, misogyny, abuse, trauma, et cetera, et cetera. And the struggles we face are intersectional and interconnected. And so I wanted to tell a story about these characters, these queer heroes that endure and fight and overcome by being whole, by being queer, and by relying on each other for support and for strength. The struggles we face are intersectional, interconnected. The way that we'll overcome that is too.
Can you tell us about the journey from novella to novel, what the journey from novella to novel is like for 80 Days?
Yeah, so it originally started as actually my college thesis, and that was just part one, the first 80 pages of the story. And I got through it, but I always felt like I wanted to, keep going with the story and turn it into this long, slow burn thing. The first part of 80 Days, our hero, Jay, the pilot, gets into trouble, and I knew that I wanted to pull him out of it. And so the rest of the story came together in the years after I self-published the first part. And I was taking it to conventions for a while. And this is when Prism came in, because I was tabling at WonderCon in 2015. And then I took a break and I wandered around. And then I was like, oh, what's this booth? And I'm like, it was like this black booth with all this rainbows and stuff. And then I was looking closer. I was like, wait, all of these comics are queer. This is awesome. And that's how I found out about Prism. And that's how I found out about the Queer Press Grant. And, I was fresh out of college. I was like, everything seemed so out of reach. I didn't tell anybody that I was going to apply. But until it was a week before the deadline. And then I was telling my partner oh, there's this queer comics thing, and maybe it would help me finish the story, but it's a week away. I don't think I'm gonna do it. And he was just like, are you crazy? You have to do this. So I did. I applied in the nick of time. And yeah, I was really honored to win the grant in 2016 with Elizabeth Beyer, co-winner. And yeah, that really motivated me to keep working and see the story through.
That's awesome.
Yeah. Thank you, Prism.
So one of my favorite parts of 80 Days is the comedy. And I'm curious, what went into including humor in a story that also deals with such serious thematic concerns? And do you have a favorite comedic moment from the story?
Oh, yeah, I'm so happy to hear you mentioned that, because it is a very pretty overwhelmingly dark and serious story. But humor is a part of life, and laughing at things is how we can get through things sometimes. It just kind of arose naturally, I think. It would be too difficult to face the kinds of problems we face in real life and then go to fiction and face this unrelenting darkness also. So I wanted to break it up sometimes, just with a little bit, just to feel more human. I think, well, I want to hear your favorite part. I think probably one of my favorites, one of the things that always made me laugh was when Fix and Sable have just started interacting, and there's a misunderstanding when something's going wrong in the plane, and she's like, "What did you two do in here?" And then Tiggs is like, "Oh, I don't know what you mean. I don't." It's just like, to the radio, please, like focus. Yeah, what's your favorite part, Avery?
I've got it bookmarked right here. The reaction shot Sable has there is, I fell out of my chair. It's amazing. I love it so much.
Yeah, I think that's one of the only times the fourth wall is broken.
So good. I love it. Just right over the shoulder.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'm curious about Beryl the Plane as a character, who I assume is named for Beryl Markham.
Yes.
How did you approach including this important presence in the story?
Oh, well, it was just built in from the beginning. We talked last time about what inspired the story, the golden age of flight, the autobiographies of 1930s pilots. And, you know, they're people that love their planes, right? They love flying. And in their writings, it always comes up a lot. Like, you know, they talk about the beauty of flying and of nature, but they talk too about, you know, how wonderful these aircrafts are, like, and how like beautiful it is to be able to fly because of, you know, the craft that went into making that plane and the craft it takes to maintain it, all the people that are involved in flight. So this is a long way of just saying that planes are important to pilots, so I needed to make the planes very beautiful and important in this story too.
And I'll have a spoiler related plane question in a moment. So if anyone wants to avoid spoilers, then that would be a good time to get out. But first, an unrelated question. All of the characters in 80 Days have very interesting outfits. Where did you turn for inspiration for these costumes, and did you have a favorite?
Oh, thank you. Well, I love fashion, and let me think. I guess when I was designing them, you know, a lot of it was just personal preference. I love like flashy long coats. Sable's outfit in particular throughout a lot of the book is inspired by the Italian police uniform, the carabinieri, with the black, with the rope accents and the red piping, things like that. And then Jay's outfit is based on just a general sort of cartoon romanticization of like leather pilot jackets. When I could, I would go to like vintage conventions, vintage clothing conventions, or like thrift stores and stuff. So I think those kinds of influences also work their way into the look of it. But overall, I'm just really inspired by the aesthetics of that time. There's some inspiration from like Hollywood movies too. I was looking at a lot of costuming from back then, as well as like street clothing from back then. It's all just picking the parts that are like, that's cool, let's put that in.
I really love Sable's gloves. I
Thanks.
thought those were. So 80 Days has been nominated for a GLAAD Award. What has this and the general reaction to the graphic novel been like?
Oh, wow. Let me tell you, when I found out about the GLAAD Award, I was sitting on my bed and I was taking a rapid at-home COVID test because I found out I got exposed. So I was like checking to make sure. It was negative. I was fine. But, you know, I was taking the test and then I was like scrolling and I was like, what is this? And I was like, oh my God. Like I had to like very carefully put the test off to the side because, you know, you have to keep it level for it to read properly. So I was like, oh my God. And then I just started screaming. Yeah, the reaction it's amazing. It's really, really humbling. I've been, you know, just continually shocked at how far this story could fly. You know, it also just made the Young Adult Library Services Association's Great Graphic Novels for Teens list of 2022. And man, that means so much to me. Like librarians, teens, they're my heroes. You know, I wrote certainly the kind of story that I would want to read now, and I think what I would have wanted to read as a teen. And it means so much to me to be able to reach, you know, the the kinds of people that I would always have wanted to reach, but I never imagined actually would. So it's just been really wonderful.
That's lovely. Okay, so now the promised spoiler question. I'm curious, does the plane at the end have a name?
Oh, that is a great question. I don't have a name for it, but I will let readers imagine what their name for it might be. I'm assuming that Sable would let Jay name it, if anything. But yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. Got to pick another pilot.
Okay, and my very last question is just, is there anything else you'd like me to include?
You know, I have been thinking about this since the last time you asked this, like months ago, because at the time I was like, I don't know, I'm just happy to be asked questions. But yeah, there's a couple things. First of all, nobody ever asks me like, how did you draw, you know, all 300 plus pages of this? And they were like on like 14 by 17 Bristol paper. How did you do that in a year or two without breaking your wrist? And I really do want to talk about that because super important, and especially to any young artists out there, please, please, please take care of your physical self, not just your mental self, that too. But yeah, there was a point in time during the inking, especially of 80 days, the inking is the hardest on my wrist, probably because it has to be so controlled. When it was hard for me to draw, and you know, I was getting like shooting pains, I had to go see a physical therapist, which was thankfully covered by my insurance. But you know, they told me, you know, it's this nerve, it's the ulnar nerve, and do these kinds of stretches every day that you're going to be drawing, and even when you're not going to be drawing, to be really good about it. But yeah, and you know, working with them for like I think 4 weeks, I was able to get back to the point where I could draw every day again. But yeah, take care of your wrists, like, you know, look up stretches online, look up Draw Stronger by Criado Wilberg, and also see a doctor if it hurts, because they can tell you exactly what kinds of stretches to do. That's really important because you don't want to stretch out the wrong thing. Yeah, I'm the furthest thing from this, but be a jock just about specifically this, if nothing else, because it's really important. Yeah, so that's my piece of advice for any young creators watching this. The other thing is, you know, nobody's ever really asked me why it's called 80 days. Why do you think it's called 80 days, Avery?
Well, there's Around the World in 80 Days.
Sure.
Then I also, there's a lot of 80 in here because there's 80, it's like a repeated motif that comes up. And then you mentioned earlier, the first section is 80 pages, which I don't think I realized. So there's even like secret 80s in there. But that was my 9th question that got left. I was curious about the recurrence of the number 80 because I'm a big fan of numerology. So
yeah. So I mean, you know, the Jules Verne reference is there, but it's like, you know, casual. It like suggests adventure and all that, but it's not really related to that. It is really just about the first part of the story took place over 80 pages, and actually, I think I even timed it out that, you know, Jay's journal entries, that the first part of the story is from the point of view from, it covers 80 days, like the time span. That's how long it took him to fall in love. And yeah, I set the page count at 80 because, you know, like I said, it was my college thesis. I was like, I'm gonna, you know, it was like a challenge, like, can I tell a story that feels full in this amount of time? And I did. And then afterwards I was like, well, let's just stick with it. So actually each of the 4 chapters has 80 pages of art. I don't know, it just became like a lucky number for me after that. Like, you know, I order food and it's like, oh, your ticket number 80. I'm like, yes, it's destiny. Yeah.
That's awesome. I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
No, thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you so much, AC, for speaking with us. And if you haven't read 80 Days yet, please, your local bookstore or public library has a copy and you should really read it.
Thank you so much.
Bye.